I want to go next to Congresswoman Diana Harshbarger. She's a Republican from Tennessee. Welcome, Congresswoman. But here's what's interesting about it. She's also a pharmacist, right? And that's been the business that you were in. And you've been warning about the risk of sourcing so many prescription drugs from China. And the president was just talking about that. This is kind of the next target in some way. So let's pick up, that conversation, because that's really, really interesting because, we get caught up in the tariffs, 145 versus 125 and what's next. And what's next might be pharma. So you know a lot about it. What do we need to do?
Well, he's doing the right thing, putting pressure on China. I've gone to the Hill for 25 years and talked about this even before I was elected as a pharmacist.
Right.
And all the burdensome, crushing over-regulation that they put on my profession, and warning them as a compounding pharmacist who creates formulations based on these bulk chemicals or these APIs, these active pharmaceutical ingredients, which is what we're talking about. It is devastating to think that China controls 90% of that market, and it was no accident that they lowered the price and cornered that market. And it's almost like we're held hostage to them. And so I know he has negated tariffs on pharmaceuticals, and he's talking about implementing those. I just talked with a huge company in my district about a product that needs to go, they're trying to keep tariffs off of it, but we need to get it on the tariff list because they make it here. And we don't want the Southeastern Asian market to come in and do the PET. But you have to do this with a fine-tooth comb because 97% of ibuprofen comes from China.
Right.
You look at your Tylenol, your antibiotics, all these things that are critical to this country. It's just like we're being held hostage. So that's why he wants to incentivize these companies to make it here in America.
I know it's hard to change these things overnight. I know you have some ideas about it. I want to put up what you wrote about in Newsweek. We could talk about that. And then, I want to talk about maybe what some of the challenges are after that. But these medical and pharmaceutical companies of friendshoring, bipartisan common sense is what you wrote, as the United States seeks to reduce its reliance on medical products produced in non-allied nations, could weaponize such dependence, should look to the Abraham Accords and the countries there and their robust biopharma industries to help our nations diversify. How would that work?
Well, I have a bill that's the United States Abraham Accords Cooperation and Security Act, and what that will do is put an FDA technical assistance facility in Israel.
Okay.
And we've had great interest in doing that. It just teaches them how to get their product to market sooner. FDA is the gold standard. And so instead of going through the European Union and then coming back and having to go through the FDA, do it once. It saves money, it saves time, and we can push back on China and anybody else. And what will happen, we have the UAE asking us, can we have satellites in those Abraham Accord countries? So that would bring them and strengthen them as an Abraham Accords nations, and Saudi Arabia is even interested in that. So we can have a hub in the Middle East and push back on China that way.
Okay, so that's one way to do it. The other way the president wants to do in the immediate term is these tariffs that he's been threatening specifically on pharmaceuticals. So how would that help, or would it help? Is there any risk to it? There's been some research, like Brookings have put up a thing that said, will pharmaceutical tariffs achieve their goals? And what they said was that tariffs will provide a strong incentive for increasing U.S. manufacturing of brand name drugs, but not the older off-patent generic drugs. And they say that market represents over 90% of the volume, only a small share of the spending. So what would you say about that in terms of whether this will actually achieve what it wants to achieve?
Well, I've talked about something else along those lines for years. They will end up closing these manufacturing facilities if they don't make money on those older generics, which is a travesty because we know the side effects and what happens when you take some of those older drugs. We do want to incentivize these companies to put these factories up in America, whether or not you have to decrease the tax they pay, or with any industry, especially pharmaceutical industry. But why don't we start by giving the companies that are already here? It's like we have the only penicillin plant in the whole country in my district, and we don't even have a contract to make that for our country. That's one place to start. And then if we have allied countries where we could get those APIs, we can absolutely have a contract with those countries in order to ship those products in, or give us the ability to even compound those in certain instances.
Thanks so much for watching. Just go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.